Hare Krishna.
Haribol, please accept my humble obeisances. Glories to Guru Maharaj and Prabhupada. Thank you so much for joining. So we'll start with the Mangalacharan and then we'll start with the discussion. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjanarshakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shavasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vacharam pangam langyate girim yat kripatamam vande Shri Gurudin taranam parmanandam madhavam. Namahum Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shanavadi Pachachadi Shitarane. Yep, thank you so much for joining. We started off with the NOI last week. We did the preface, intro, and the first verse. Today, the plan is to complete verses 2 and 3. And if you have any time left, we will do discussions. And from next week onwards, we will start with the group presentations. So let me go ahead and share with you my screen. Okay, so this is text 2. And so the text 1 talked about the 6 Vegas, the 6 pushings, Vachu, Manasa, Krodha, Jiva, Udar, Prastha, Vegam. And that essentially spoke about the qualifications of a guru. So when one is starting their spiritual journey, and if they are serious about it, the first step is to take shelter of a guru. And the first text essentially identified the characteristics of a guru. Now, what does one do when one takes shelter of a guru? So, Shraddha, Sadhu, Sang, Bhajana Kriya. And now one begins to execute devotional service. So, Rupa Goswami then, he will walk us through what are the do's and the don'ts while executing devotional service. It is to the first 7 verses. Atyahar prayaschascha prajalpaniyamagraha janasangascha lolyam cha shadbir bhakti vinashyati. One's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities: eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required, endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters, practicing the spiritual rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically, associating with worldly minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness, and being greedy for mundane achievements. So essentially, this verse transitions the practitioner from Satogun to Shuddha Sattva. Right. So devotional service is practiced on a transcendental platform. The mode of goodness is the highest, but it's still material. But when one begins to practice these do's and don'ts, then one begins to make advancements in the execution of bhakti. Right? Now, one thing you have to keep in mind is that we often say that bhakti is completely spiritual and it has no material considerations. And that statement is accurate, but it applies to the practitioners. The practitioners may not be completely spiritual. They can and they will have strong material anchors. So for them, these instructions that are given, they are seemingly material instructions, but these instructions are given to help them progress in their bhakti, which they are practicing with mixed modes. Right? They may be in the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance. They are executing bhakti. So these injunctions and prohibitions help such people. So we'll quickly go over the 6 of them. So atyara means either overeating, ahar means food, or atyahara also means collecting too much. Right? So this goes against the Ishavasim principle that we studied in Isopnishad. Ishavasim idam sarvam yat kinchet jagatam jagat tena tena bunjata ma grada kaschit sui dhanam. Right? So the Ishavasim principle says that one should only take what is kept aside for them. But overeating or over-endeavoring violates that principle. Now, what is overeating and what is over-collecting? That kind of is dependent on the ashram of the person. So, for a renunciate to have even 2, like when Mahaprabhu was traveling, even for him to keep some grains for the next meal was atyahara. And he chastised his servant Govinda when he got some extra rice, saying that we'll cook it for you later on. And he was very upset. It's because the mood of the renunciate is complete dependence on the Lord. The householders are expected to accumulate some level of wealth. So the levels are different, but nevertheless, that distinction needs to be made. And Srila Prabhupada, he explains the atyahara by giving the example that if you put a bag of rice in a public place, the birds will come and only eat as much as they need. But when a human being comes, he will take the bag away. Not because he can eat everything in the bag, but he wants to hoard. That I'll eat tomorrow, day after, or even if I don't eat it, I'll keep it. That is atyahara. Why does it spoil one's bhakti? Because it removes one's faith in the Lord. The point is we made that because I don't trust the Lord to provide for me, let me overcompensate for providing for myself. And when applied to overeating, it, as Prabhupada says, that overeating is transitive effect. That the udara prastha, that when you overeat, the belly gets agitated, the belly sits on the genitals get agitated, and one's sexual desire goes up, one's desire to enjoy materially goes up. So they're all counterproductive to spirituality. Prayaschas is collecting more than necessary. It causes prayaschas or unnecessary endeavor. Right. So atyahara is the result, and prayaschas is the effort that goes behind it. So if you want to collect more, then there is a prayas, there is an effort that goes behind it. And the reason that they're given separately is because Atyara does not always require prayas. Right? Somebody may be born in a rich family and they may get wealth without a lot of effort. And also prayas may not always result in Atyara. One may work very hard, but may still not get enough to over endeavor. So they don't go hand in hand, but the mentality is very similar. Right? So the over endeavor applies to all aspects. So there is karma prayas, jnana prayas, yoga prayas. Karma prayas is excessive working, jnana prayas is studying scriptures just for the sake of gathering knowledge. Yoga prayas is practicing yoga for getting different siddhis. Of course, in the context of bhakti, there is nothing like over endeavor, unless one is trying to execute bhakti for fame, fortune, and followers. Then it comes in the context of prayas, but then it's not really bhakti. It's something else. Prajalpa, idle talk. So one of the things that were talked about was vachuvegam, is to basically control the tongue, what you speak. And prajalpa is a result of not being able to practice vachuvegam. And generally it is useless, mostly about other people's, mostly it is criticism, typically in the mood of envy. It includes, Prabhupada says, reading newspapers, books of fiction, solving crossword puzzles, and other materials that have no real value. So in themselves, it may look harmless, but it invariably results in offensive behavior. So we all have experienced to this, that we are working and a colleague comes by and just for idle talk. And maybe the talk begins with saying, okay, the weather is good and it may rain. But then invariably, it will end up in criticizing somebody. It will end up negativity, gossip. That's the natural flow of prajalpa. So it essentially vitiates the consciousness. Niyamagra is interesting. So there are two aspects. So niyam, of course, means rules and regulations. And agra means, it has two meanings. It means following and not following. So when in the context of following, it means excessive following of rules and regulations. So excessive following means that one forgets that the rules and regulations are a means to an end and not an end in itself. So some people become so attached to the rules and regulations that they follow it fanatically, but then there is no Krishna over there. And one of the Matajis who lived in Gita Nagari in the 80s, she was once sharing with me that the mood at the time there was almost literally. She was saying that, when the conch for the Mangalarti would be blowing, then people would be running to go to the Mangalarti and they would knock anybody off on the way. So while it is good to be there in front of the deities when the Mangalarti begins, but not at the cost of offending other Vaishnavas. Right, so this is Niyamagra, where there is too much obsession about following rules. Some people are very obsessive about the different aspects of Sarnavedi Bhakti. And it eventually results in pride. It comes from pride and results in pride, right? So they will basically then measure themselves that, I do all Ekadashis without Nirajal. How many Ekadashis do you do without water? Or I always get up at 2 o'clock. What time do you get up? So then it essentially it's a manifestation of one's pride. The other aspect is Niyamagra is rejecting rules and regulations, right? So people sometimes they will modify them as per convenience. Like some devotees say that 4 regs was during the earlier time, now only 3 regs are relevant. Sometimes they'll say by 16 rounds, it's a number of convenience. It could be, I would rather chant 10 good rounds than 16 rounds. Or they will change the procedure for deity worship, saying it's not meant, this was meant for the temple, not for home. At home, we can do this. So essentially what they're doing is that they're diluting their faith in the descending instructions of the acharyas. Right? So somebody once asked me, why 16 rounds? Why not 18? Why not 14? And the answer to that is because Srila Prabhupada said 16 rounds. Why did Srila Prabhupada say? Because Bhakti Siddhanta said 16 rounds. Right? So he could have said 20 rounds, and then Prabhupada would have said 20 rounds, and that's the number that we would chant. But if we start making adjustments on our own, the acharyas are empowered to do that, not us. If we start making adjustments on our own, then the mind will take us to all kinds of places, right? There's a funny story about Malti Mataji herself says that in the early days in San Francisco, when the temple was so poor that she would steal for the deities. She would steal milk. So when the milk van would come and they would deliver, she would go behind and steal the milk for the offering. So Prabhupada was doing his japa and looking out of the window, and he saw Malti Mataji stealing the milk, and he called her. So what are you doing? And she said, Prabhupada, we don't have money, but we want to offer something to the deities and you. So Prabhupada laughed, and first he said, well, even Krishna used to steal milk. But then he said that we need to be perfect. We need to be perfect gentlemen. Devotees are always perfect gentlemen. He stopped her from doing that. Because then the mind goes down that route. That, okay, we can do this, we can do that. The ends justify the means, but then we don't have the maturity to make sure that the means have the proper guardrails around them. So these are some of the examples. I'm not going to go through them where the niyams have been broken, but by acharyas. And Prabhupada, he broke the rule of sannyas by crossing the ocean. He broke the rules or the unsaid rules by giving second initiation to women to do deity worship. And there's the case of Govinda, who stepped over the body of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to massage him. But then he did not step back the whole night. And Mahaprabhu asked him, what are you doing? Why didn't you eat? And he said, you were lying blocking the door, so I couldn't step over your body. Mahaprabhu said, but you must have stepped over to come into the room. He said, yes, but that time it was for your service, and then stepping out would be for my service. So I'm willing to break the rules for your service because you're the Lord, but not for my service. Right? So mature devotees, they demonstrate this understanding of the ultimate goal and act on it. Sadhakas, we need to be guided. So the fifth is Jansangha, or association with worldly minded people. So this is essentially with people who are not interested in Krishna consciousness, right? And Prabhupada gives the examples of clubs and associations and chambers, because association is a very, very natural propensity of humans. Like they say, human beings are social animals. So they seek association. And association, as we know, is very potent also. A person is known by the company that he keeps, and a person is molded by the company that he keeps. So associating excessively with worldly-minded people will make one worldly-minded. Just like associating with devotees makes one Krishna conscious. If you look at the 7 aims of ISKCON, 2 of them are geared towards association, right? To bring the members of the society together. And to bring the members closer for the purpose of teaching a simpler, more natural life. Right. So we see this, and Prabhupada in his speech would also keep saying that the temples are spiritual oases where people can come together. And so he was never in favor of Nirjan Bhajan or devotees, performing individual austerities. His focus will always come to the temple, form, congregate over there. So this is one of the things that comes both in the don'ts and the do's. So avoiding Jan Sangha comes in the don't, and seeking out the association of devotees comes in the next verse. And lolium is basically greed. So one should avoid the association with Mayavadis, Bhakti Kamis, Mukti Kamis. So the reason is that they're over endeavoring for mundane goals. So Atyahara and Jansang and Lolium, they're in the similar category, that developing too much of greed for something material will divert one's mind towards that. And once some devotees came to Prabhupada saying that, can we buy lottery tickets, and if we win, we will give the money to the temple. And Prabhupada said, Krishna is rich, he doesn't need your money. But if you go around buying lottery tickets, then that's where your mind will go. So it's very difficult to understand when one's mind will go from this is for Krishna to this is for me. So better to stay in the safe zone. So Prabhupada concludes with a summary of how one can live a life that avoids this 6 pitfalls. So the Ishavasya principle is the guiding principle, right? He says all these kind of isms, socialism, communism, they all fail because they do not understand the Ishavasya principle. Somebody says it belongs to the community, somebody says that it belongs to the king, somebody says it belongs to the government, but actually everything belongs to the Lord, right? So the example is that a person finds some money that is lost. He can either take it, in which case he's a thief, he can leave it, in which case he's foolish, or he can find the owner and return to it, which is the mood of a devotee. That everything that they find in this material universe, they use it in the service of Krishna. So Prabhupada says, when the human society gives up these elementary faults enumerated by Rupa Goswami, all enmity will cease between men and animals, capitalists and communists, and so forth. In addition, all problems of economic and political maladjustment and instability will be solved. This pure consciousness is awakened by the proper spiritual education and practice offered scientifically by the Krishna consciousness movement. This Krishna consciousness movement offers a spiritual community that can bring about a peaceful condition in the world. Every intelligent man should purify his consciousness and get rid of the above mentioned 6 hindrances to devotional service by taking wholehearted shelter of the Krishna consciousness movement. So Prabhupada keeps giving one's attention back to Sangha. That even if we identify these pitfalls, it is difficult to give them up without being in the association of the people who are like-minded and endeavoring to do the same thing. That if you do not want to practice Prajalpa, but everybody around you is doing Prajalpa, it will be difficult to sustain it. Right? But on the other hand, if everybody around you is doing Krishna Katha, even if you're inclined to do Prajalpa, then eventually you will practice Krishna Katha. Okay, let's move on to text 3. Utsanishchaya dharya tat karma pravartana santyagat shato vritaha Shadbir Bhakti Prasiddhyati. There are 6 principles favorable to the execution of pure devotional service. Being enthusiastic, endeavoring with confidence, being patient, acting according to regulative principles such as Shravana Kirtana, Vishnu Smarana, hearing, chanting, and remembering Krishna, abandoning the association of non-devotees, following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. These 6 principles undoubtedly assure the complete success of pure devotional service. So the last 2 verses were yamas or prohibitions. That vachovegam, control your speech, manasa vegam, control your mind, and then atyahara prayaschasya. So they were don'ts. The next 2 verses are niyamas or injunctions, or the do's. So this verse is in the category of Shraddha. That how can one act on the platform of faith so as to increase faith, right? So the goal is described as we studied in Nectar of Devotion. The goal is pure devotional service. Anabilashita shunyam jnana karmadhi anavritam anukulena krishnanu anushilana bhakti uttamam. So after having defined the goal, Srila Prabhupada proceeds to explain how to attain. Right? So he first emphasizes that bhakti is a cultivation. Right? Then he says there are 9 ways: Shravana Kirtana, Vishnu Smaranam, Padya Sevanam, Arshanam Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanived. Right? This is the famous verse by Sri Prahlad Maharaj. Right? Now, of these 9, Shravanam is the most important aspect because it is the source from which the other 8s emanate. Right? So, Prabhupada talks about the famous Tadvidi Pranipatena to say that when one hears from a bona fide guru who has conquered the 6 urges mentioned in verses 1, then the person's bhakti is well established. And Mahaprabhu basically in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he tells the Brahmana Brahmate Kona Bhagavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasada Paye Bhakti Lata Bija. Right? Once again establishing the importance of a spiritual master. Right? So the spiritual master will give us the don'ts and will give us the do's. Right? So that's why Prabhupada talks about Shuddha Bhakti, talks about the way to attain bhakti, which is Shravan. Who do you hear from? The spiritual master. Right? So then that's the context of the verse. Now let's look at the 6 items. So Utsaha means enthusiasm, and Prabhupada says enthusiasm means action. Right? One should act for Krishna. So even when you looked at how we describe pure devotional service, we say that anukulena krishnanu shilanam bhakti uttamam, which means that bhakti should be executed. Right? Bhakti is not just a state of mind. It is also something that one acts upon. Right? And what action one takes, that could be one of many options. That's where the guidance of the guru comes. Right? The guru, looking at the mood of the disciple, looking at the level of advancement of the disciple, will give instructions. Right? So the instructions are meant to be followed enthusiastically. Right? So without enthusiasm, even for advanced devotees, it's a little bit of a contradiction. One cannot be in advance without enthusiasm. But enthusiasm is so important that if there's a lack of enthusiasm in advanced devotees, they will stagnate at that point. Right? Prabhupada, at the age of 70, he was the most enthusiastic that his disciples who were in their 20s, they found it difficult to keep up with him. He was so enthusiastic. right? And that enthusiasm is essentially fanning the flames of bhakti. Then nishchaya is confidence. So nishchaya is supporting utsaha. That the nature of bhakti is that the results come gradually. They are subtle. They may not come in the way that we expected. How do we still keep our enthusiasm up and up? By having nishchaya, by having confidence that the words of Guru and Krishna are true, especially in times of adversity. One may say, I was doing all this bhakti, then why did this happen to me? And that would essentially puncture our enthusiasm. But then nishchaya comes to our rescue. That it says that have faith. Have faith in what we have been told, because ultimately it will manifest. So Prabhupada says that confidence is acting on faith. Srila Prabhupada says success is assured. It is never lost. Even if there is a setback, it will resume. So there are devotees who left the movement and they came back. Right? And when they came back, they did not come back as Bhaktadas. So which means that they did not come back as new devotees. They simply resumed from where they left off. Dharyat is patient. Prabhupada says one should not be impatient in discharging devotional service, but should take instructions from the spiritual master and execute them with patience. Right? So the famous verse spoken by Lord Brahma, Tattenukampam Susumekshamanam, where he says, this is him praying to Krishna, that those of your devotees who patiently wait for your mercy while tolerating all the adversities that is happening to them, they are the ones who will ultimately enter into your kingdom. In fact, he says for them, entering into your kingdom becomes their right. Right? So that's the glory of patience. Prabhupada gives an analogy of a newly married girl that she wants to be a mother immediately. But there is a process that needs to be followed. Surrender to the husband, wait for her to become pregnant, wait for 9 months, and then she has the child. So regardless of how keenly she wants, there is a process that needs to be followed. Similarly, when the devotees surrender to the process, there is the process that needs to be followed. Listening to the instructions of the Guru, executing the various angas of sadhana, Vaidhi Bhakti, doing the do's, avoiding the don'ts, and then waiting for the results to manifest. If one does not have patience, then, so this is a term that was mostly coined in early days by ISKCON devotees, PDS, which is the pure devotee syndrome. That people join and they hear a little bit about the philosophy, they hear a little bit about the mood of advanced devotees, and they become advanced devotees. And they don't understand that there is a process they have to patiently follow. And typically the PDS syndrome is followed by what is known as blooping. Again, this was termed by devotees, which means that then they would bloop. Bloop means that they would fall into this ocean of material existence, never to be seen again. Then tat karma pravartanat means performing various activities that are favorable to devotional service. So these include the 4 regulative principles. Right? One says that I will follow the 4 regulative principles. So they must be followed enthusiastically. Right? So tat karma pravartanan is essentially Krishna Anushilanam. That it is a continuous cultivation of activities favorable to Krishna consciousness, which means you perform the favorable activities and you're vigilant to not perform the unfavorable activities. So the beauty of Krishna consciousness is that it gives us a wide variety of activities to pick from. If you like deity worship, do that. If you like study of the scriptures, do that. If you like outreach, you can do that. Cook for the deities, clean the temple, help in the temple construction. There is a whole wide variety of activities that can be done, and all these activities are favorable to devotional service because they result in increasing one's bhakti. Right? And then there are those activities that are non-negotiable. One must follow the 4 regulative principles. One must chant the 16. One must take instructions from the Guru. Right? So those are activities that are especially potent. Sangtyagat, so giving up the association of non-devotees. So as I mentioned, this is one thing that comes in both the verses. So, and it talks about how important association is, right? So, asat sangha. So, sangha means like sangam, like we have sangam in Prayag. Sangam means merging of the rivers. So that's the power of association. That when one is in sang, then the qualities merge. One cannot have prolonged association in the sang and not walk away affected by it. It's not possible, right? So that is why this is one area where one needs to be vigilant. Right? Previously, it was said that Jan Sangha, associating with worldly minded people, will spoil your bhakti. Here it is mentioned as a positive thing, Sangtyaga. So having understood that Jan Sangha spoils your bhakti, what do? Sangatyaga. Give up the association of worldly minded people. So if only devotee association was recommended, then one may think that it is okay to associate with non-devotees as long as one can associate with devotees. So if you notice these 2 verses, they talk about giving up the association of non-devotees. They don't really talk about taking the association of devotees. And the reason is because that comes automatically. Because association is the natural desire of every living entity. So if one has sangatyagat, one has given up the association of non-devotees, what is left? Take the association of devotees. Right? So the 6 Goswamis are an example of it, that they gave their association as much as possible. They lived in the association of Mahaprabhu, of each other. So by being vigilant both ways, by being vigilant of associating with non-devotees and by being vigilant of trying to associate with devotees, one's bhakti gets protected. And Satavrata is following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. Sometimes it's called Sadhuvrata. And if you remember, there were 64 items of devotional service listed in the NOD. The first 10 items are considered to be the preliminary items for Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, right? Which means you're doing it as per Vidhi, as per the rules and regulations. So the sadhu is one who follow the scriptures. And when you follow the sadhus, then you're automatically following the scriptures. The advantage of following the sadhus is because they have internalized the mood of the scriptures. The scriptures tell so many things about so many situations. Like it's almost like going through an encyclopedia of medicine. And it talks about everything. You can read the whole encyclopedia, but you can't treat a patient because it just gives you millions of permutation combination. But when a doctor reads it, then he can use that to practice medicine. So all you need to do is follow the doctor. So that is why Satyavrata is a practical way of following the scriptures. Okay, so this essentially brings us to the end, and we have about 15 minutes left. I want to stop over here and see if you have any discussion with respect to the previous class or this class. Yes, Naradi Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dhanut Pranam. So, Prabhuji, last class, you mentioned that association with very exalted devotee is also not good, and it can cause downfall. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So, extensive association with devotees that are a lot more advanced than you are is potentially harmful because a few reasons. One is that the devotees are acting at a platform that they have reached, which may or may not be conducive to the platform at which we are. For instance, if a devotee is advanced enough to have transcended the need for sadhana, so they're at the stage of spontaneous devotion. So they may get up in the morning and start doing bhajan kirtan. They may not chant prescribed number of rounds. Their mood for deity worship may be different. So while you acknowledge the fact that they're advanced, if you try to emulate it, your own bhakti will suffer. That's one reason. And the second is that when one associates too closely with advanced devotees, then unless one is very careful, they will inadvertently perform offenses. So one of the examples that is given is that Srila Prabhupada's servants would associate with him very closely. So they would give him massages, and they would see him sitting in a gamcha and taking a bath. And then there was Prabhupada who would be sitting on the Vyasthan with garlands, with hundreds of people speaking, completely different mood. But their minds would get a little affected. That, same person that, and many of the servants would actually give massage themselves to Prabhupada. So it's said that one of the greatest offenses of a disciple is to become familiar with the spiritual master. Right. So then that mood of reverence goes away, which is needed. So they start performing offenses, either mentally or in action, and that, of course, is completely harmful to one's devotion. So Sangha, ideally, it's said it should be Swajati. Swajati means that with people who have the similar mental conception as you have, and it should be with people who are slightly more advanced than you. And that way, you can understand what they're doing, you can relate to it, but they're slightly more advanced, so they take you from your comfort zone into your stretch zone.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you for the question.
Somebody else is asking.
So Bhakti Vinod Prabhu, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for the wonderful class. question I have is like some practical tips how to avoid atyahara, especially collecting and hoarding stuff.
So as in all things, um, doing is almost always followed by developing conviction. So not doing atyahara from a practical perspective is very easy. Don't collect, right? You're collecting a lot, don't collect. Nothing can be easier than that. But obviously it's not that. It's because within the mind, we have a conception that is causing us to collect, whether we want to build defenses for ourselves, whether we want to keep both our feet securely in the two boats. So from a practical perspective, these things are solved. So these things are said to die. They die the death of 1,000 cuts. So it's difficult to say that tomorrow I will stop atyahara, but what is more reasonable to say is that tomorrow I will reduce it. So practical tips for reducing it is giving in charity to the temple. So this is money that you could have held it for yourself. Now you give it to the temple. Practical tip is helping out devotees in need, opening up your house to other devotees. So they don't create initially a big dent in one's practice, which is good. But what they also do is that they, in a very subtle way, they dissolve that strong knot of atyahara. Every time when you give in charity, you feel good about it, you give a little bit more, you feel better about it. You know, every time you share your prasadam with other devotee, it's a very small thing. In the scheme of things, it's almost minuscule, but then it builds those giving muscles, it weakens the atyahara muscles. And the potency of bhakti is, of course, acting all the time. So what we want to do is to basically, and this is for the anarthas as a whole, we want to, we want to dissolve them. We want to cut them with the 1,000 cuts. And that way, once they are gone, they don't come back.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Ritesh Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam. So you mentioned about Sangha, that we need to be associated with little bit more advanced than us. So how do we, I mean, it's said that we should not be judging people, but in a way, when we are trying to figure out who is advanced and who is not, we are judging them, is it? And how do we identify an advanced devotee, slightly advanced devotee?
So both very good questions. You're right. We are not expected to judge, and one of the words that comes later on specifically forbids in NOI itself. So judging, the activity of judging is basically trying to say that that I am better than the person, or this person is better than the other person. But we see that there is this whole process of trying to, in the nectar of devotion, it's given who is an advanced devotee, right? The distinction in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is given who's a Mahabhagavat, who's a Kanishtadhikari, who's a Madhyam Bhagavat. Nectar devotion talks about the 3 levels of advancements. Why are they given there? Not for us to judge, but basically for us to determine where we are, where somebody else is, and then we can accordingly take shelter or give shelter to them. Right. So, like in the NOD, it's mentioned that based on one's, what were the 2 criteria for Kanishta, Madhyam, and Adhikari? It was based on faith and knowledge. one whose knowledge is, one who is strong in knowledge and weak in faith is, or weak in knowledge and strong in faith is Madhyamadhikari, strong in knowledge and faith is Uttamadhikari. We have a good sense of where we are. So that way we know that, this particular devotee is more committed, is more strong, and we take inspiration from him. Now, when I said that you should associate with those who are more advanced than you, it also means that you give your association to those that who are less advanced than you. But association is either you give it or you take it. Right? When you are with a more advanced devotee, you're taking association. You're learning from them. When you're with others, then you're giving association. So you should not then start acting like a neophyte when you're with a neophyte. Or you shouldn't start acting as an advanced devotee. Taking association means that you're learning from them. And at all times, you should be in a non-judgmental way. Right? Different advanced devotees also manifest different levels of advancement. And I remember once I was trying to arrange a home program for Guru Maharaj. And a person I called and I said that, would you be interested in doing a home program? And he asked me, he didn't know, he was relatively new to the congregation. Well, not new to congregation, but he was new to, he had different mood. He said, well, does he sing well? And I said, you're not really getting somebody to perform like music for you. He will do bhajan kirtan, but essentially it's for, it's for Krishna Katha. So no, I want somebody who sings well. Then I said, I'm probably talking to the wrong person over here. So that mood is offensive. When you start looking at a particular parameter and saying this person sings better than this, so I should invite this person. This person gives better classes, so I should be more inspired by this person. That's an offensive mood. But if it is just in terms of this person gives excellent class, so let me go and learn from his class. This person does excellent bhajan, and let me get inspired by the bhajan. That way you avoid this mentality of, even in your mind, offending devotees.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Ajit Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much for the wonderful explanations, and especially in the context of when you describe patience. So, in the context of the verse Tatya Anukampam, where Brahmaji specifically, talks about staying patient, especially in the face of adversity. What are some of the ways of keeping or strengthening that patience? And of course, it seems like the first four, meaning enthusiasm, confidence, faith, and then patience, they're all interrelated. But wanted to hear your thoughts, and if you could elaborate more on how to strengthen the patience and strengthen the faith and confidence.
So once faith and confidence is most tested during times of adversity. And in that very verse, Lord Brahma gives us a clue that when one is faced with adversity, one considers it to be the result of their own activities.
Right.
And Prabhupada supplements that by saying that when one experiences positive thing, then they consider it to be a benediction of Krishna.
Right.
So sometimes when we practice bhakti, we expect everything to be already Vaikuntha, that no kunthas, no worries. But actually, devotees also suffer. They suffer from bad health, they suffer from, they die, they suffer from old age, they suffer from the reverses. But what keeps them going is this understanding that all this is happening to me because of my prior activities. So thank you, Krishna, that you're burning away my karma. I should have gotten a much worse reaction, I should have gotten on a scale of 100, I should have gotten 90, but I'm getting only 5. So thank you for that. That is the mode that endears Krishna immensely to the practicing devotee. And Krishna responds by immediately taking away that tribulation. How does Krishna take away the tribulation? By making it so that the person is no longer affected by the tribulation.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it will externally stay, but Krishna makes it so that it does not affect. So maybe it will continue to rain, but then Krishna puts an umbrella on. Right. So that's the benediction. So to the outside world, it may still seem that this person is out in the rain, but what they don't see is the umbrella that Krishna puts on you. So developing this ownership and accountability,
Mm-hmm.
that is very powerful. And other ways is, as it is said, that if one develops this attitude of gratitude,
Mm-hmm.
that we thank Krishna when things are going well, and we thank Krishna when things are not going well.
Yep.
So our thanking muscles, they become exercised when things are going well. And hopefully in the life of a devotee, more often than not, things are going well. But our muscles get exercised. We keep saying, thank you, Krishna, for this. Thank you, Krishna, that traffic is good today. Thank you, Krishna, that my health is okay today. Thank you, Krishna, that I have enough money to feed my family and give a little bit to the temple. So our thank you muscles become so strong that when we are faced with adversities, then they simply act upon. Thank you, Krishna. You burned up so much of my karma with so little of reaction.
Right. So, Prabhuji, one quick clarification, if I may ask on this. So, in this verse, I mean, in 10:14:8, so bhunjan et evatma kripam vipakam. Sorry. So that is the part that alludes to the accountability and responsibility that the devotee feels that I am going through this because of my own action. But the one thing that I couldn't find was where it says that I'm actually getting 5% instead of 90% of what I was supposed to get. That was the part that I couldn't find a reference on, and maybe I'm missing that. So if you could guide me to that, it would be very nice.
It's not, so it's not spoken as part of the verse, but if you listen to Srila Prabhupada's lectures and that of other devotees, it's a common theme that Krishna, out of his kindness, gives us a token reaction to our past activities. Right? If you look at if you do a search on the Veda base for this, or look in Shikshashtakam, not Shikshashtakam, what is the compilation of letters by Srila Prabhupada? Shikshamrita, right?
Yeah, Shikshamrita.
Prabhupada's letters are there. So this is a theme that comes over and over again. Right. I guess, Prabhu, what you're asking for is a scriptural reference to that.
Yes, Prabhu. I've been searching for that for a while, but the only thing that I could come close to was actually there was that whole pastime of Lord Ramchandraji and I think Indra's son, who was doubting that Ramchandraji is the Supreme Lord. And so I think Narad Muni advised him to become a crow, and he came and he bit Sita Maiya's foot. And then when Ramchandraji reacted, he realized, or Indra's son realized what he had done. And so he tried to run, but of course he couldn't run away. But then when he came back, he apologized to the Lord, and Lord Ramchandraji gave him a very light kind of a slap. So that was the only piece that I could find, but I don't know if that's...
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't know. I myself don't know where the Vedic reference is. I mean, for me, Vedic reference is Srila Prabhupada speaking, but you're right.
Right.
Let me see if I can do some research and get, of course, Prabhupada always speaks based on the Vedas, so there must be definitely some reference that we can relate it to.
Sure, Prabhu.
Right, and in the meantime, if you find something to share.
Certainly, Prabhu. Thank you so much, Prabhu. I appreciate it.
Prabhu. Thank you. Wonderful questions. Advaitari Prabhu? Advaitari Prabhu, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for the class. It's very nice on this deep topics. I'm sorry, I have several questions, but in general, the Bacho Begum, the words that you discussed last class, basically. So if I'm unable to control my senses to a certain degree, especially those few things that has been mentioned in this verse, what should be our approach? How do I really control my speech? How do I control my food? Is there any magic formula, or is it just practicing and over a period of time it is going to happen?
Thank you, Prabhu. So as I mentioned, Prabhu, the first verse actually is a verse of almost perfection, right? It's talking about Vachavega Manasukro, the way Manu has controlled all these things. These are basically attributes that we can aspire to develop, but they're really put over there because these are attributes that we should see in those that we want to take shelter of. And it ends with such a person can become the spiritual master of the world. Now, when at the stage that we are, we're not really aspiring to be the spiritual master of the world. Right? When I first read the verse, I said, why is it there? We don't have aspirations to become the spiritual master of the world. So what's the point in putting it over there? It's put over there for us to take shelter of one who is the spiritual master of the world. How do we develop it? The verses that follow that tell us how we develop these qualities. Like I said, there is prajalpa. Prajalpa, it basically when we say that avoid prajalpa, that automatically results in vachuvek.
Okay.
Right? When we say udara, that control the belly, then there is atyahara.
Mm-hmm.
Atyahara is not to do atyahara, that is controlling udara. So the 6 do's and the don'ts that follow, they will help us develop these 6 qualities. And that's another reason they're put over there, that as we follow the 6 do's and don'ts, we will see these 6 qualities manifesting in ourselves. Like you can imagine, right? If one is associating with spiritually inclined people, one is enthusiastic about bhakti, one is patient, then things like krodha and mental agitation, those things will automatically get pacified more and more. So they're also given there as a symptom that we can watch as we practice the 6 do's and don'ts.
Yeah, these characteristics are so, I think, so valuable, and if we are able to achieve even a semblance of it, basically, I think it will change our lives. I would say for not able to control my, say, for example, speech. There is a segue. This is a segue to my second question. Sometimes I feel that I'm offending a Vaishnava, and not only I am certain that I'm offending a Vaishnava. So in this kind of situation, basically, when you feel and you know for certain that you have committed or you have offended a Vaishnava, of course the other Vaishnava is not saying you anything or anything of the sort, but maybe internally he's trying to adjust to the situation. But if I happen to offend a person, a Vaishnava basically. How do I, reverse the situation? Because sometimes I must say I probably take some time before I understand the whole situation, and the reaction period has kind of passed, right? Just because I do not have control over my speech. So,
Sure. It's a very practical question, Prabhu. Thank you for asking. And Raupal Maharaj speaks extensively about it, how to deal with Vaishnava Prad that you may inadvertently commit. And so the opposite of aparad is seva. So the first thing that is recommended is you have offended a Vaishnava, is to basically beg forgiveness from the Vaishnava. That I offended you, I'm sorry about it. Vaishnavas by nature are humble. They may not even acknowledge the fact that you offended them, but regardless, just the act of saying that please forgive me for the offense, that goes a very, very long way in mitigating the effect of the Vaishnava Prad. Now, if for some reason you cannot do that, so it's said that if the Vaishnava still doesn't offend you, still does not forgive you, or for some reason you're not in a position to approach the Vaishnava, then seva, that one can serve the Vaishnava, and through service one takes away the effect of the offense. If for some reason one cannot serve the Vaishnava, then one should mentally take shelter of the Vaishnava, mentally ask for forgiveness while experiencing genuine remorse and taking shelter of the holy name. So it is said that if one commits dhama prad, then one can mitigate the effect by serving deities. If one commits seva prad, which is when serving deities, one can mitigate it by serving the holy name. When one commits nama prad, which is offenses against the holy name, one can take shelter of Vaishnavas. When one commits Vaishnava prad, there is really no other shelter than the Vaishnavas themselves. So one takes shelter of the Vaishnavas, one takes shelter of the holy name, one takes shelter of the Dham, one takes shelter of deity worship. But after having taken shelter of the Vaishnava, it should not be that you offend a Vaishnava and go and chant an extra round and think it makes it up. After having taken shelter of the Vaishnava, one takes shelter of the other merciful aspects of devotional service.
thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. So we will take one last question, a little over time, but Vajranath Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji. So my question is, when we are walking on the road, we find some money, and then so we should take it. Best way to go and find the owner of that money and then give it to them, right? So, but what if you don't find him? Like it happened to me, but money is still with me, but I just want to know what to do with it.
Oh, okay. So I think that is presented there, Prabhu, mostly as a metaphor. That if one finds money, then either one uses it or one leaves it and finds the owner. It's a metaphor for all the things that is around us. Like we are using it and we are exploiting it.
Right.
Better for us to find the owner and give it back, which is the whole Ishavasya principle. Practically speaking, if you found money and you haven't found the owner, the best way is to give it in charity to the temple.
Yeah, that's
because ultimately the money belongs to Krishna, even though there may have been a temporary owner, but ultimately it belongs to Krishna.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And another one is, could you please post these slides from today's class and last class in the WhatsApp group?
Will do.
Yeah.
Will do.
And the schedule for next classes.
We'll do that too. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll end over here. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyascha padītanam
Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Anantkoti Vaishnava
Jai.
Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Jai. Gaur Premanande.
Haribo. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you very
Prabhu.
much.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
So much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Haribol.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.